What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back for the last episode of our Transfer Target series, and we're going to be focusing on the number 9, the striker. Some people say this is our most pressing issue coming into the summer. We've got 10 targets to speak about, and, you know, going back a couple of years, 3 years, a lot of people say there's not a lot of number 9s around, but I found we managed to find 10 of them going in for this episode, so maybe this is the rebirth of the striker role. And the first guy that we've got up is Brobbey of Ajax, 25 million euro market value, 22 years of age, and he's just had a stunning season for Ajax. And he's such an interesting player. He's come through the ranks at Ajax, and Ajax sold him to RB Leipzig. And then after a season, RB Leipzig loaned him back to Ajax and then sold him back to Ajax a year later. He's been the starting striker in the last 2 seasons for Ajax, and he's definitely grown as a player in these last years. He's had a monstrous amount of goal contributions this year, 18 goals and 10 assists in what was not the best season for Ajax, to put it lightly. And he looks like a player with supreme physical ability and definitely someone that knows where the back of the net is.
Yeah, been heavily linked, I think, with Arsenal this summer as well. So definitely a player who's been talked about a lot. Really had a massive breakout season this season for Ajax, and a lot of people are talking about him with the amount of goals he's getting. Now, when I looked at the stats, I've profiled these players as pressing forward, so I've including some of their defensive metrics as they, because that's quite important, I feel, for how Ange wants to play his striker. He likes some pressing from the front and trying to win the ball back as early as possible. So if you bring up his profile, obviously performs very well when it comes to, obviously, he outperforms his XG, so a very good finisher, gets a lot of assists as well for a striker, so that's really, really impressive. When it comes to his shot on target percentage, he's a very clinical finisher as well. Really good at getting amount of shots. Unfortunately, his defensive numbers are not the best. Doesn't really get involved too much in kind of trying to win the ball back too much. Actually, quite very, very low when it comes to his defensive numbers. So that's definitely something he's going to need to improve if he's going to play under Ange Postecoglou. But when it comes to having a player who's really good in front of goal, when it comes to his last season, he's definitely right up there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've watched a bit of Ajax this season. He has always impressed me. Just his tenacity in front of goal is just is a joy to behold when you're watching him. And yeah, and his physical presence up there as well. So a lot of players, you know, sometimes you can take it with a pinch of salt with the number of goals people get in the Dutch league. We've seen it firsthand with the likes of Vincent Janssen. We've seen Matthias Kesman years ago come to Chelsea after getting like over 40 goals in a season in their Eredivisie. But I think this guy could be a bit of a different kettle of fish because of his supreme, you know, kind of physical attributes that he does have. But he has been linked with a number of clubs from around Europe, so we'll see how that one progresses. Next up, we're going to look at Benjamin Sesko of RB Leipzig. This is a player who I'm absolutely in love with. 20 years of age, 40 million euro market value. He's been touted out to many different clubs around Europe as well. He has a very similar profile to him, to maybe the likes of like Erling Haaland. You know, very physical, really good in the air, and dynamite finisher. And he took quite a while to get to grips with it in his first season, in the first half of the season for Leipzig. But second half of the season, he is absolutely exploded. And he seems to be getting a goal contribution or a goal every single game at the moment. And he's a future star in the game, and he's another one off that RB kind of conveyor belt at the moment.
Yeah, he's one of those who was quite heavily talked about before his move to Leipzig about a potential star. I think he might have been at Salzburg before and then moved to Leipzig. Has, as you say, not quite didn't quite hit the ground running straight away, but I thought once he got to grips with the Bundesliga, hasn't stopped. And as well in the Champions League, I watched him against Real Madrid and really gave them a run for their money in those 2 legs, and he was really difficult to deal with. As you say, he's got pace, but he's also tall and physical, which is a very rare combination you get, which is why players like Haaland are so unique. How as well he profiles as a pressing forward. Actually has pretty good defensive numbers, so does definitely like to get stuck in and make challenges in the final third, so I do think he would suit that. When it comes to his outperforms his XG pretty well. His goal to shot ratio is really good. His shot on target percentage is really high, so very good finisher as well. Maybe early in this season his shots weren't making. Maybe he was getting a bit unlucky, but maybe his kind of data has outweighed that. Assists are kind of low, so maybe you can up that quite a bit. Shot creating actions doesn't really create too many chances from those kind of point of view at the moment. But as you can see, he's still 20 years of age, and he's got so much more to grow, I feel. And has a release clause supposedly this summer as well. So I do think a player of that age, that physical profile, and as well the fact that he does do his defensive numbers as well, is very, very encouraging. So I think he should be one near the top of the list. At that rate.
Absolutely. He should be top of the list. He really should. At that age, the stats and the ability and the performances that he's showing, it's a completely no-brainer for any club. And I do feel like his sights are probably set a bit higher than Tottenham, maybe even the likes of, maybe not Real Madrid, but that kind of caliber of team, the top of the game. That's where he's going to get to. But now, because he's 20 years of age, maybe he could be just about attainable, but I do feel like he might be going to a bigger club this summer. Next up is Dominic Solanke, 26 years of age, 40 million market value at Bournemouth, has had a sensational season for Bournemouth, and he's a player that has been improving year on year. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I do think he's got, 16, 17 goals this season. 18 goals, there you go, for Bournemouth. He's a good player. I just don't know if he's any better than Richarlison.
That's obviously the question mark. I think he's a bit better in the box than Richarlison. I actually think he's got a bit more technical ability than Richarlison, and I think physically he can bully. I think he can bully defenders a bit better. The only thing Richarlison maybe has on him is a bit more of a presser, and I think maybe those one-touch finishes Richarlison can be a bit better at. As he profiles, obviously he's playing in quite a pressing-heavy team in Bournemouth, so his defensive numbers are fairly decent, above average. Shot-creating actions from defensive actions are really high, so it means he does create a lot of opportunities from his defensive contributions. His XG to shot is above average, so he's a pretty good finisher. Goal to shot on target ratio is pretty good, so he does take advantage of a lot of the chances he gets. When it comes to goal creating actions, shot creating actions, fairly low, and assists. So he's not the best assister. Doesn't really bring other players into play. He's more of a finisher himself, but he does press high, and he is quite a good finisher. And as you say, I think last season 12 goals, this season just gone 18 goals. So he has been improving that. At 25, might be entering his prime, and we might be getting him at a good time.
Yeah, last year, I think it says he only got 6 goals, and the year before in the Championship, 29 goals. So he didn't really relay that kind of form into the Premier League in his first year back, but definitely this year he's been brilliant. So definitely something to watch out for with Dominic Solanke, and he may well be on the move this summer. Next up is Toney, 28 years of age, 50 million market value, obviously of Brentford, going into the last year of his contract, I believe, so could get him at quite a modest fee. They were talking about 100 million from him about a year ago. Now I think you could probably get him for 40, 50 million. A player of supreme ability. There is just something that doesn't sit right with me in terms of the way he's been touting himself out to big clubs, few various other things that he's done in front of camera as well, which signals to me not the best kind of attitude.
Yeah, he's very self-confident, I think is one way to put it. But
that's a nice way to put it.
Since coming back from his ban, obviously he started really well, but did tail off a bit when it comes to the amount of goals he scored later in the season. Obviously, did pick up an injury, which impacted him. I think he's obviously a very physical player. I do think he's got a better all-round game than Solanke, but Solanke, when it comes to finishing, especially this season, has definitely been better. But last season, what Toney got was one of the top goal scorers in the league, wasn't he? So he got a lot of goals, although a significant portion of them were penalties. How he profiles as a pressing forward, really strong defensive numbers. Obviously, Brentford are quite a defensive team, so maybe that's got a part to play with it. But definitely gets involved with the pressing and tackles in the attacking third near the top of the list. So definitely does win the ball back quite often. Tackles, interceptions as well for a striker, and the 87th percentile, so really high there. So it would fit. That tells me he does, when it comes to attitude, clearly on the pitch, he definitely displays that. His shooting and goals to shots, obviously Brentford again are a counter-attacking team, so his chances usually are limited and usually at a premium, which is why he performs quite low at them. When it comes to his chance creation, shot creating actions are average to above average, does get a decent amount of assists, so I think his all-round game is pretty strong and does have good defensive numbers, so I do think Spurs will like that. But he is 28, has had a few question marks with his attitude, and is also actually quite off the boil when it comes to goal scoring. I think he's on a bit of a goal drought at the moment.
11 games or something.
So that is also something that goes against him.
Yeah, I think it might be something that turns the real big clubs away from him this summer, because you look at the likes of Arsenal were heavily linked with him when they clearly need a number 9 at the moment, and that's completely gone cold since the ban, because he was banned for quite a while for the gambling issues that he did have. But in terms of his progression for Brentford, in his first year for them, 31 goals in the Championship was monstrous numbers. 12 goals in his first year in the Premier League, which was fairly good, and then 20 goals last season. And obviously this year, he's only played 16 games because of that ban, scoring only 4 goals. So is a cause for concern in the real year that he's really touting himself out to the big clubs. Hasn't really performed in front of goal too much.
But he is English. He's got a year left on his contract. We know he is a player who can play in the Premier League, and he's a player who could fit the system. I think profile-wise could potentially fit. So if there's a deal to be had, I wouldn't be surprised if Tottenham explore it.
At 28 years of age, though, you expect Spurs to spend big money on him? I'm not too sure.
That's what I'm saying, not big money. Like, I think he probably would cost less than Solanke, but it would only be a deal that Spurs do, especially at that age, if it was a deal, around 40 million, I think.
Next up, we're going to talk about Sergio Guirassy. And when you're talking about someone of 28 and the price that they might cost, this one is something Spurs probably will be looking at, because he's got a 15 million release clause, 40 million market value on transfer market. He's playing for Stuttgart. He's had an absolutely sensational season, firing Stuttgart to second in the league. He's up there with the top goal scorers in the league, just behind Harry Kane, I believe. But I think Borussia Dortmund are very close to taking up that release clause. So if no one else comes in, he probably will be going to Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah, obviously for that price tag, when there's a player who's scoring that amount of goals, I think it's 17 million, as you say, clause. It's hard to not at least explore that, because if you can get a goal scorer for such a little price, especially in this market where goal scorers are at a premium, you'd be stupid not to at least look at it. And obviously he's had an unbelievable season for Stuttgart. They finished second in the league. He got 28 goals and 3 assists in 28 games. So more goal contributions and appearances this season for Guirassy, overperforming his XG by 11 goals. So clearly, by 8 goals. So a massive overperformance in his XG. So you can look at it two ways. Is that an outlier for him to outperform his XG at such a point, or is he just that much of a clinical finisher? If you look at his stats, not a very good pressing forward. It seems to be said here, because his defensive numbers are extremely low for all the defensive metrics. Doesn't really get involved in the tackles. So that's something he would have to develop at Spurs. But obviously, as you can see, his attacking numbers are really, really strong. Outperforms his XG. Goal to shot ratio, very, very clinical striker as well. Assists, not great, but shot creating actions really high. So it does create quite a few opportunities for his teammates, maybe not fully taken advantage of by them. So clearly a very good goal scorer, but would have to do a bit more harder work, it looks like, when it comes to his off the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, those numbers are just monstrous, aren't they, for this season in the Bundesliga, which has been a very good league this season. Firing a team like Stuttgart into second is no mean feat, and to get those goals and those numbers behind you is very, very impressive. But is it, like you say, is it an outlier? Is it a one-off? Or can he do it on a consistent basis? It remains to be seen at the moment. Next up is Santiago Jimenez, someone that's been linked with Spurs for a while. 23 years of age, 45 million market value, currently at Feyenoord. Had an amazing season under Arne Slot this year in terms of numbers. But there are some question marks about him.
Well, he got 23 goals and 6 assists this season. Just turned 23, so still quite a young striker. Mexican, 5'11", so fairly decent stature. When it comes to his finishing ability, I mean, if you look at his profile, defensive numbers aren't the best, although shot creating actions from defensive actions are above average, and so are ball recovery. So it doesn't completely neglect it, but other stuff like tackles in the final third and tackles won.
Better than Guirassy anyway.
He's better than Guirassy at that, it's fair to say, but not the strongest. Does outperform his XG by about 3. Sorry, he's got very similar XG to what his actual XG was. XG was 22.8 and his actual XG was 23. So you probably got the goals you would expect him to get. Doesn't outperform it, so it doesn't show him to be the most clinical, but also does get the goals you expect him to get. His shot percentage on target, 76th percentile, so fairly strong. And obviously, assists-wise and shot creating actions quite high, so it does obviously bring other players into play. Did get 6 assists as well this season. So profile-wise, not terrible. Maybe would like a bit more defensively, but still quite young. But I think he's had a stellar season. He's still, and obviously at 23, has a lot of scope to improve. So I think he's quite an interesting option.
Yeah, but there's something to look out for in Santiago Jimenez, where he had an unbelievable first half of the season, getting like over 20 goals in his first half, and then only getting about 4 goals or something in his second half of the season. So something has happened where he's gone a bit off the boil in the second half of the season. So I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, it seems to have tailed off. So definitely something to look into when you're scouting him.
Yeah. Next up is Joshua Zirkzee of Bologna, 40 million market value, 23 years of age, could be on the move this year. Obviously, they did make Champions League. Their manager, Thiago Motta, is going to Juventus. So it could be an opportunity to steal someone like Joshua Zirkzee, who has supreme amount of talent.
Yeah, and obviously formerly of Bayern, it was a former Bayern Munich academy product and was highly sought after at the time, but unfortunately didn't make the grade there. Has gone to Bologna and has done really well this season. 11 goals, 4 assists in 34 games, so pretty deep. 15 goal contributions this season in Serie A. 23 years of age, also 6'4", so really tall, quite good physically, and as well, as you can see from his data, performs really strongly from the pressing. As you can see, gets really, really strong defensive numbers. So obviously Bologna are quite a high pressing team, so that would obviously play into that, but it definitely shows he's capable of doing that side of the game. One thing that's interesting is his non-penalty XG to shot is really low, so actually doesn't get himself too many high quality chances, but also suggests he does kind of get makes the most out of the chances he does get, because they're quite low quality. His goal to shot ratio also quite low, shot on target percentage also low, so that tells me he's not the best finisher, and also he does miss quite a lot of chances, but he also performs very well at shot creating actions, so and assists above average, so he does quite good at bringing other players into play, quite a decent target man, but definitely one of the poorer kind of finishers we have on the list, it seems, but very good defensively.
In terms of...
Which is all you want in a forward, right?
Yeah. In terms of what he's going to cost, he does have a 40 million euro release clause this summer, which is interesting because you're getting a player at 23 years of age. Those stats where he's not looking quite favourable, he can improve that, particularly maybe under a new manager and a new system and different training methods as well. I do feel like he's got levels to go up, and he will go up those levels. So maybe at 40 million euros, which is about 35 million pounds or something around that, could be getting a very good player on your hands for quite a modest fee.
Yeah, definitely a big physical presence.
Next up, we're going to look at Omar Marmoush, another player that's been heavily linked to Spurs over the past couple of months. 25 years of age, 22 million euro market value, plying his trade at Eintracht Frankfurt this season. A player that has been personally recommended by Mido this summer. And the last player that he personally recommended to Spurs was Mohamed Salah. And that didn't exactly turn out bad, did it?
Well, so I think we should definitely take his recommendations very seriously for Omar Marmoush, and he's also quite a versatile forward, can do a job on the wing, but has played mostly up front. Had a pretty good season for Frankfurt this season. I think, what was it, 11 goals and quite a few assists.
12 goals, 6 assists.
12 goals, 6 assists, so...
17 in all competitions and 6 assists.
So 18 goal contributions in the Bundesliga, which is pretty good. And I think what's also quite encouraging, if you look at his data, again, defensively, from the pressing stats, really strong. Can obviously do that job really, really well, and gets involved pressing from the front. And his ball recovery, shot creating actions from defensive actions, good. Tackles and interceptions, really high as well for a forward. So that's really encouraging. What's less encouraging is his finishing ability. Got a shot on target ratio quite low, so he's not the best at getting his shots on target. His XG per shot is not great, so it doesn't get into the most promising positions. But his non-penalty goals is above average, so he shows he does make the most out of the opportunities he does get, but doesn't get himself too many opportunities. So that is something he should work on. But still quite young, really high on the assists and shot creating action, so definitely a player who gets the best out of his teammates for sure. But could be a bit of a better finisher. But at 25, should be entering his prime, and maybe he could go up levels coming to Tottenham.
Yeah, I mean, he's never really made it anywhere else in terms of his when he's come to Europe. He started off at Wolfsburg, had 4 seasons there, had 1 season of regular, consistent football, and only got 5 goals and 3 assists. Went on loan to St. Pauli in the Bundesliga 2, 7 goals in 21 games, not the greatest. Then he went on loan at Stuttgart in the Bundesliga, only managed to get 3 goals to his name. And then this year, he is kind of making a name for himself. So is it a one-off season? Are we going to see him progress from this level? We don't know.
Hard to say, but he's definitely done very well. And I think we would be looking at his profile and we will be very interested in him, I reckon.
Next up is Albert Gudmundsson of Genoa, 22 million market value, 26 years of age, a very versatile player that can play a number of different positions in the attacking lineup as well as in midfield. Had a great season for Genoa, watched him for Iceland against Israel in the playoff as well, scored a hat-trick, some stunning goals in that game as well. And he's a player that's been heavily linked with Spurs.
Yeah, and he's one that's we've been really interested in during the summer, and I can see why, because of his versatility, because of his profile. He is 26, so he's not the youngest on the list, but when it comes to how he performs on the data, again, really strong, pretty strong defensive numbers, as you can see. Tackles, interceptions above average, ball recovery is really high, so he does have decent defensive numbers. One thing that's quite interesting is that he massively overperforms with his goal-to-shot ratio and goal-shot on target, but his non-penalty XG to shot is low, so doesn't have too many good quality chances, but he actually scores a lot of goals where you expect him not to score, so he overperforms his XG quite well.
I think he scores a few free kicks.
He scores free kicks from a few shots from range. Shot creating action's really high as well, so definitely really good with bringing other players into play and creating opportunities for his teammates. But his non-penalty XG to XG is really low, so one of the lowest. So he doesn't get himself into... That would suggest that he's overperforming massively, and maybe he'll revert to the mean were he to move on. So there's definitely some caveats, but I can definitely see with the price that he's at, with his good defensive numbers as well, I can understand why we're looking at him. But I would suggest if we would sign him, I don't know if we can keep these numbers up. I'm sceptical about that.
Yeah. And last but not least, we are going to look at Artem Dovbyk of Girona. Finished on top goal scorer in La Liga this year, 30 million market value, 26 years of age. He's had an absolute stunning season for Girona. Very physical striker, loves a header, definitely knows where the back of the net is. I'm not sure in terms of pressing and his, hard work rate, what he's like, but I know definitely in the air and as a physical kind of target man, that's where you want him.
Yeah, at 6 foot, a very physical presence in the attack. And obviously Girona had an unbelievable season, finishing in the Champions League spots for the first time. And obviously he's a big part of play. And what a season in terms of goals, 24 goals and 8 assists. So one of the best performing forwards in La Liga. In terms of his XG, he got 24 XG, so he did pretty much finish the chances you expect him. Defensive numbers very weak, so doesn't really get too involved in the pressing, it seems. So he's going to have to adjust that slightly. But one of the most clinical finishers we've seen, his non-penalty XG to shot really high and his goal to shot really high, so a very clinical finisher. And as well, got 8 assists this season, so one of the highest when it comes to getting assists. So very much an all-rounder in the forward line, but doesn't really get too involved in defensively. So that's definitely something I think Ange will demand of him if he's come to Tottenham.
Yeah, he's an interesting player. He's a bit of a journeyman. He's applied his trade in the Ukrainian first and second division, the Moldovan first division, Danish Superliga as well. In his last 2 seasons in the Ukrainian division, he scored 14 in 17 games and 24 in 30, which got his big move to Girona. And he's backed that up. He's backed those numbers up in La Liga, which is very interesting because 24 goals in 36 games, like I said, finishing top goal scorer in La Liga. And, when the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona and the players that they have to deploy, you have this guy outscoring them all, which is unbelievable. It's his first year in a top league. You got to say that. So you maybe caveat it with that. But do you think he'll be that suited to Ange Ball, and do you think he'll be that suited to the system that we play?
I think in terms of getting the chances and scoring, it seems that he would be suited, and as well, he does bring other players into play. But when it comes to how we press from the front and counter press teams when we lose the ball, is he going to be good at that side of the game? That remains to be seen. This data suggests he needs to improve on that, to be honest.
Yeah. And he's also got a 40 million release clause this summer for Girona. So another one that could be on the move. But to be honest, if I was him, I'll probably stay at Girona for another year just to see. Because he's found a really good place there. He's found a system that's clearly working for him. So maybe it'll be wrong of him to jump ship so quickly. But in terms of all those 10 strikers that we've gone through, the two I like the best might be Sesko and Brobbey, you know. Sesko is obviously my number one, complete number one. If we can get him, you go get him. For that price, for 45 million, you've got your striker there for the next however long you can keep him, basically. Brian Brobbey, I think I've really liked what I've seen from him in the Eredivisie this season. And then you got players like Guirassy. You can bring him in as kind of competition for 15, 16 million, however much it is. You can't really go wrong with the numbers that he's produced. And maybe I'll take a punt on Joshua Zirkzee as well. I think those four probably be in my top four.
I think Sesko, profile-wise, got to be number one. I think performs really well on everything we want him to perform at. And obviously, he's 20 years old, supreme physical profile. I think when you're looking at the data, I think Marmoush, is definitely one I would look at because he performs really well. I have some really good metrics, and I think he's had a good season with Frankfurt. Toney, I think for a good fee, if we can get a good fee for him, I think he's one who performs quite well at some of the good metrics. And then I think, Zirkzee needs to improve his finishing, but he's definitely one, if he can do that, at 6'4", really good. So I think those are the options I'd look at.
All right. Well, there you have it. Those are our striker options, and that brings an end to the Transfer Target series. Let me know in the comments section below what striker you would like to bring in this summer. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, come on, you Spurs.